Welcome to another episode of Think Mighty, a video series and podcast for active lifestyle and outdoor brands, where we interview marketers, founders, and entrepreneurs on their growth strategies. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube or follow along wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Let's get into the episode. So today we've got Reza from Shoelace. Reza, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. So I've been following Shoelace for quite a while. I know you guys just launched recently, but I've been really interested with what you guys are doing. So why don't you take a minute just to tell our audience who you are and what you do?
Yeah, cool. Sounds good. So my name is Reza. I'm CEO at Shoelace. We actually got started a little under 4 years ago. We've almost kind of had a couple of relaunches since refined our focus a little bit. My background has kind of always been in entrepreneurship. I dropped out of university to start my first company and kind of rambled with that one, trying to learn how to code on my own and figure out how to market that business, and just got a pretty good sense of what it feels like to start a company and how to get that to spread into the world and find customers. And then ultimately, I realized that at some point I probably should have a job. That'll be a good thing to have done at least once in my life. I ended up joining a startup that was growing pretty fast in Toronto. That's where I met my two co-founders, David and Alex. The startup was also kind of in the e-commerce space. And the three of us kind of developed a pretty good friendship and knew that at some point we wanted to leave and start our own company together. And so we're actually just coming up to about 4 years now. May 2015, quit our jobs without much of an idea. So we didn't know what we wanted to build, just that the three of us wanted to work together and start something. And so I'll kind of leave all the details of what the first couple of months of ideation looked like. But we were just trying a bunch of different things, seeing types of problems that we were interested in solving. And in general, we were very interested in trying to help businesses market better, find customers better, grow faster. And, because starting to realize that a lot of what marketing has started to become has kind of shaped into being somewhat of a technical role, where the more technical you are as a marketer, the better you can pick up new skills and new technologies and new methodologies. And so we tried to fill this gap between can we do stuff with software and programming to be able to help non-technical marketers be as efficient as technical marketers. And so that was some of the framework that we thought about our initial ideation. I'll tell you the quick idea that we were kind of working on right before we stumbled into Shoelace. And the idea was we wanted to help businesses who shared a similar audience but didn't compete with each other. We wanted to help them cross-promote each other's businesses. And so one way that we thought we could do this was that if kind of a variety of businesses could partner up, and when somebody buys a product from business A, they'll start to see a retargeting ad for business B and vice versa, as a way for these two businesses to kind of help each other grow and help each other get in front of new audiences. That was a sort of idea that we were pursuing. And we spoke to a bunch of brands and businesses who all told us yeah, it sounds like a cool idea. I'd love to try it when your beta is ready and you have a couple partners for me. But in the meantime, you guys seem pretty smart. And I've been struggling with my own retargeting to begin with. So would you mind just giving me a hand with that just as a favor? And we're sure, no problem. We'll do whatever you want as long as you promise to use our thing. By the time the fourth or fifth customer asked us for the same thing, we realized that, okay, maybe there's an opportunity for us to help create value for people to make, getting up and running with retargeting campaigns a lot more efficient. This was about 4 years ago, when even things as simple as firing your Facebook pixel events were hard. Setting up your dynamic product catalog was hard. Those things have become really efficient. But when we were getting born, those things were incredibly difficult to figure out. You probably had to read 3-4 blog posts, go into your theme.liquid in your Shopify store and copy some code here, paste some code here, export some CSVs. It was very cumbersome to do just getting basic setup with retargeting. And so that's kind of what we got started with. And then over time, we can get into that a little bit later as well. But over time, we just started to develop more and more theories on the problem with retargeting, how annoying it's become, how this can be improved in general, evolved into thinking about retargeting in a lot more of a journey approach. And so we've recently started talking about customer journey retargeting as this newer way to do retargeting that's less annoying, more memorable, and kind of more fitting to where we are in the world from a 2019 digital consumer's mindset, the type of advertising they'll expect to receive. So we can talk a bunch about that, but that's how we sort of got started into Shoelace. And we've just been basically thinking about specifically the problem of retargeting for e-commerce merchants for the last 4 years, probably more than anybody else in the world. We've just been obsessed with this problem. And yeah, a lot of cool things have come from that kind of laser focus on this one specific problem.
Yeah, that was one of the things that, like I said, I've been following you guys for quite a bit now. And there's a lot of digital marketing, either technology experts, companies, a lot of people out there that run what I call the acquisition traffic, but not a whole lot that really just, like you said, laser focus on that customer journey retargeting. So it really grabbed me as a marketer. And it's something, the customer journey is something that we talk to with our clients about a lot. And I think it's something that people kind of overlook, the actual journey itself. People tend to see awareness to purchase and nothing in between. So what you guys are doing really resonated with what we're preaching and practicing as well. So I'd love to hear from your perspective. How did you evaluate a customer journey? How do you help your clients do that? And sort of how do you see a customer journey for an e-commerce brand?
Sure. Yeah. So, we think about this in a couple of ways. One is like, the broader customer journey from that like awareness piece all the way to what the shipping experience is like, what the unboxing experience like. That entire thing counts as a journey. We typically think about that to some extent at a high level, but the part that we are super laser focused on is the sort of the journey that they experience with the paid marketing of the brand that they may have touched base with. So, typically what you'll probably see today with the state of retargeting, and you ask consumers this, they'll all kind of tell you the same thing. So you visit a website, you're checking out some products, you may even buy the product. And then for months and months and months, you just start seeing the same retargeting ad over and over again, often for the very product that you bought. And our view has been that this approach to retargeting, which is super profitable, you're targeting a high intent audience, and it will deliver return on ad spend. That's why marketers love it, and that's why they do it. But we've kind of gone off the rails as marketers. Is sort of what our view is, that like we set up a dynamic product ad, we let it run for like, targeting people for 60 days. We get crazy high frequencies, and we still look at the analytics dashboards and the ROAS, the return on ad spends are good. But thinking about what that means from the customer experience on the other side of like seeing that same ad over and over again is not a great experience. And what we're saying of why this starts to matter now, like why does that start to get pretty critical in 2019 and beyond? And one of the reasons we think about is that as the costs of CPMs have gone up and it's becoming more and more expensive to advertise on Facebook, more and more expensive to make all the math work, where you can just like, pick a product, run some Facebook ads on it, they'll be wildly profitable just on that first purchase, and you have like a good, sustainable, profitable e-commerce business on your hands. Like that's starting to dwindle a little bit. And what you're starting to see is the e-commerce brands that are sort of thriving and surviving into 2019 and beyond are the ones that have nailed a couple of things, like repeat purchase, being able to create a product that doesn't just sell to a customer once, but is like bringing a customer into your world, so that they'll buy from your brand over and over and over again, and that they have like this loyalty of the community that your brand is building. So like brand building, brand equity, loyalty, repeat purchase, these things. And you hear a lot of people, not just us, kind of talking about these things as the essential ingredients of surviving in e-commerce in this like era of high CPMs, in this era of Amazon just like gobbling up every commoditized product. This is starting to be the playbook for how e-commerce brands can sort of win in this day and age. And so our view is like a retargeting ad that is just like hammering people with the same like buy now, buy now, buy now messaging doesn't fit into that overall paradigm of how we're building businesses these days in terms of like promoting brand equity and creating loyalty with our customers, to try to explain, why is this brand special? What are we about? What is it that, makes us unique? And these things are not communicated when all we're saying is like buy this product. And so it does require a bit of a paradigm shift on the side of the brand marketers. Say, overall, this is how we're thinking about growing our business. This is how we're thinking about how we want our customer journey experience to be like as a whole. And then what does that feel like on the retargeting side? We can't just have a great customer journey on email, on shipping, on unboxing, on all of these areas. But then on our retargeting side, we just keep showing people the same thing over and over again. So the piece of that puzzle that we've just been really obsessed with is like, there are a lot of great folks thinking about this big problem that I just described in a variety of ways. Like folks like, let's say, ShipBob are doing a really great job at trying to create the piece of the customer journey around shipping speed be phenomenal. And that's part of a lot of what we're talking about. So like, I think you're seeing a lot of different companies helping brands optimize this entire customer journey. And what we're saying is like, when it comes to the paid marketing piece, when it comes to, spending ad dollars to get in front of customers who may have expressed some interest in the brand or may have bought from the brand before. How do we optimize that journey on the paid marketing piece? And that's kind of where customer journey retargeting fits for us, and where we've been kind of hoping to create value for our customers, both through the kind of products and services that we offer, but also from the content that we write. And we've kind of been writing and talking about this stuff for a while that hopefully, moves that conversation forward and creates some value.
Yeah. I recently downloaded that 54-page deck you guys have, which I highly encourage everybody to take a look at. And it was wild to see like how detailed you guys get in your strategy. And, personalization is kind of a buzzword, I think, going into this year, next year, and how can brands personalize their messaging and the experience. And to me, it's kind of what you guys are doing as well. Is like you said, rather than hammering them with the same message over and over again, like they've heard it, they've seen it. What's the next message based on where they are in their journey that we need to deliver? Mm-hmm. So for all of our listeners who maybe haven't seen anything about Shoelace, they haven't read that deck, talk a little bit about some of the indicators, like give some of the examples of indicators you guys utilize to determine where somebody is in their customer journey.
Sure. Yeah. So, to go one level deeper on, we know what retargeting, we know what annoying retargeting looks like. We know that that's bad. And we know that, there is a better way, and we kind of try to talk a better way. And so to unpack that a little bit of like, what is customer journey retargeting? What does that even mean? What does that even look like? It's based on a few principles. One is, to your point, trying to understand where somebody is in their buying journey. So we've broken it down into a number of stages. So like we start thinking about the funnel when somebody has expressed some amount of interest in the brand. So this could be the stage where they've, stumbled across the brand's Instagram page, or have visited the website, or signed up for an email list, or something like that, to indicate that they are now aware of this brand and in some capacity have expressed some amount of interest. It could be, as simple as visited the homepage, looked at a few things, just like scanned the homepage, but didn't necessarily go further to the next stage, which would be, what we've been calling like showed consideration, which maybe looked at a couple of products, looked at some collection pages, read some product reviews, just went a little bit deeper in that funnel to say, okay, I've expressed some amount of interest in this brand, and now I'm showing some amount of consideration in a product or two that has kind of got me interested. And then the third stage would be that they've took some sort of action. So maybe they, added an item to wish list, or added an item to cart, or initiated checkout, or something like that, to have that signal that they've now kind of gone further than just having showed some consideration in the product. And then the final stage would be having actually like completed a purchase, which obviously is like where, when you think about a typical funnel, that's kind of where it ends. Everyone's trying to move traffic from like that top of the funnel all the way down to that buy piece, which in our deck, we're not the first ones to do this. I forget where we actually saw an implementation of a funnel that we really liked, and we started using that as well. But it doesn't end at the buy. The buy is a great place to guide your traffic to, but ultimately you want a next stage, which is like loyalty and repeat purchase and advocacy. And so thinking about that entire funnel, and then thinking about, based on where somebody is in that buying journey, what kind of messaging makes sense to be showing to them. So if somebody is high up in the expressed interest stage and didn't even really check out any products, to be able to go super aggressive on like, here's a discount code, buy now, etc. Like it's just not the right fit for that stage, but something that is a bit more of like branded content, a piece of video that talks about one of our favorite customers, Shopify Plus brand called 100% Pure. And on this stage, they might be running a piece of video content that shows, how to apply natural foundation, or things that are creating value for customers, that are positioning the brand as an expert in their field, and creating an amount of like trust and affinity with the brand, so that, slowly you nurture them into additional stages of the funnel. Or for example, the common example, the one that everybody dreads about, is like you do end up making the purchase and you do buy the product, but then for months you still see a retargeting ad for the product that you bought. That's clearly like, the brand not taking into account where you are in the buying journey, but instead maybe after purchasing, you could see an ad in a couple of weeks that like thanks you for your purchase, or invites you to, take a photo of your product with the hashtag of the brand to kind of join the online community. Or maybe in a couple of months, you'll see a retargeting ad for a set of new arrivals that you might be interested in that are kind of similar to the product that you bought. But in general, being kind of mindful about where somebody is in the buying journey and then showing ad experiences that are relevant. The other piece is this concept of sequencing the ad experiences for variety so that it kind of feels like a story. So when you go to Instagram, when you go to Facebook, just as a regular consumer, kind of what you're looking for there is like dopamine hits of fresh content. Like you're looking for something new and exciting and interesting. And forget about sponsored ads. If you see a piece of content that you know you've already seen, and our brains are really good at remembering like pieces of content that we've already seen, you're immediately like scrolling past it. You're not, it's almost like a downer because that's not what you wanted to see on Instagram. You want to see something new. And so just imagine that experience from a brand and seeing their sponsored post. At some point, you just like have these feelings of like being fed up with this brand, of like, enough already, like stop showing me this. You're intruding in my browsing experience. Stop it. And so like the thing we always talk about is like, imagine what a world, like we are spending money to annoy our customers. Like there could be nothing worse than that. But if we understand the psyche of our consumer in terms of what they expect to have as an experience when they're on Instagram, then we'll show a variety of content over the days and weeks after their visit. So instead of, in the expressed interest phase, there might not just be one ad over the next like 3-4 weeks. There might be a series of ad experiences that the customer is being exposed to that is telling the story of your brand in one shape or another. I recently heard a marketer talk about this concept, which I found pretty enlightening. Was that like, there used to be a time maybe 5, 6, 10 years ago that brands used to have a longer attention window of their consumers. So they'd be able to like have somebody's attention for 3-4 minutes at a time, say like, here's everything you need to know about our brand, why we're great, why this product's good, here's our story, here's how we look at the world, and here's why we're a perfect fit for each other and why you should kind of buy from us. And at the end of that, the customer has everything they need to know to kind of make an informed purchase. Whereas these days, we have consumers' attention spans like 10 seconds at a time, 7 seconds at a time. And so if we're trying to tell a broader story about what our brand is and what we're about and why we're unique, and we understand that we're not able to do that in a full kind of 4 minutes, then we can chunk those out into smaller bites so that over the next kind of 2, 3, 4 weeks, there is this kind of series of various touch points that are talking about different parts of our brand so that the customer can consume that content in a way that is like native to the platform that they're consuming it at. And it doesn't kind of stick out like a sore thumb of like, oh yeah, you're showing me the same ad for the last 3 weeks, like thanks for nothing. But it feels more kind of blended into the content. So that's important. And there's a couple of other kind of principles of how we kind of define customer journey retargeting, but those two I think are the big ones at a high level. And then you can use things like, clever Facebook pixel events to trigger various signals at this stage of the funnel. With Shoelace, we do cool stuff around like trying to detect when it's somebody's first visit or second visit or third visit and fire custom events accordingly to be able to use that signal to understand like where they are in their journey. So, you could go a long way with like the basic Facebook setup of just add to cart, view content, stuff like that. But, if you do have some technical chops or use a product like Shoelace, you can fire some interesting events too that add more signal to try to figure out where somebody is in their buying journey. And then the final piece becomes like taking those and then applying really interesting creative at different parts of this story. So sometimes we say like, there are some prerequisites like before a brand is ready to like properly do customer journey retargeting. On the one hand, like you do need a broader narrative of a story to tell. If all a brand has done is like picked a Shopify theme and has a catalog of like 600 different unrelated products and there isn't like a brand story to tell, it makes it difficult. Like there isn't much to say if the entire brand experience is just like, here are these products that I found on Alibaba.com and now I want to sell them to you. It's like, you kind of do need a bigger brand narrative to have to say that there needs to be a story there. And then you also do need to kind of invest in some good creative to be able to tell that story, because sometimes that's the limitation too, right? Like I just don't have enough assets to be showing. So it does tend to be sometimes a strategy that makes more sense for more kind of mature businesses. But in general, the way that we think about it is that like the bar for succeeding in e-commerce has definitely gone up. And so it's starting to become that the competitive advantage, the differentiator, are the folks who are willing to kind of put the time to develop a brand, to develop a narrative, and to create really interesting, compelling content to tell that story. And that without that, it's just hard to be winning in e-commerce anymore without that. And so it's like we play a role in a brand's life once they've kind of understood the importance of this. But if they're still at the stage of, thinking about, why do I even need brand, or why is brand equity important, or like, I don't know if I need to have a brand story to tell, et cetera. Like it's not necessarily a good fit for the types of things that we're talking about, but we've definitely seen an upward trend towards the smart brands, the ones who are kind of seem to be doing really well, are the ones who are fully understand this and are betting their entire strategies against this sort of marketing narrative.
Yeah, we've talked a lot internally about you guys and what you guys are doing. And, the best comparison I can make is, if you were a salesperson, and let's say somebody came into your store to buy a pair of shoes and they asked you how much do they cost, and you say $39.99, and then they say, what's the material made out of? Would you say again $39.99 and continue to say $39.99? Would you continue to tell that story and convince them to make the purchase?
Right.
And that's the best way I can compare what you guys are doing to what traditional retailers and brands think about. So it's interesting to me, like, you're right, you got to tell the story and it's got to change based on where they are and what they've heard. One thing I want to ask you about, because what you guys do is based on their point in their customer journey and their buying journey, do you see that once you kind of build that out, do you have to change out the messaging and creative? Because in theory, they'd only see that ad or that piece of creative one time once they move forward or stop, right? How do you guys kind of approach that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I think one is that like a lot of the brands we work with are just like innovating and creating new content in their businesses and launching new kind of collections and creating new campaigns in terms of initiatives in their brand. And so a lot of times when we think about updating creative is to make sure that the stories that we're telling after somebody leaves are the most relevant and up-to-date messaging that the brand wants to be telling the world. And so in part, it's kind of dictated by that as well. So if one of the ad experiences, like sometimes I think about it as like, if you consume a brand's homepage and you just go from all the way to the top, all the way to the bottom, you look at a lot of cool brands and that content is changing all the time in terms of what's most important to them, what they're trying to put out there. And so in that same way, those experiences of like somebody visits the website and leaves needs to have updated content and creative based on what's the most relevant things that we want to be saying on behalf of the brand at this point in time. And then the other piece about it too is that you might have customers who the actual journey isn't super linear all the time. It doesn't happen that magically where somebody goes from visiting your website all the way down to purchase in a matter of a week. And so kind of trying to understand what happens when somebody comes back for a second time 3 weeks later. Do they just go back into the same journey loop? Or are we able to like use those signals to understand that they may have been here already and show them something different? And then the last part is, again, a lot of the brands that we work with are having an increase in their traffic steadily over time. So, if growth-focused, growth-oriented e-commerce brands generally have like traffic growth targets that are trying to increase over time, because generally if you grow your traffic, you grow your sales, provided that you're growing in good quality of traffic. So we've had brands who like kind of start with us and they have, 20,000, 30,000 visitors a month. And then over 6 months or a year, they go from that to like 300,000 visitors or 500,000 visitors. And there's a lot that changes across that kind of scaling journey when, you have a traffic volume of, let's say, 10,000 or 30,000 or something like that. There's only so much you can do in terms of granularity of segmenting out those audiences. Because at some point, if those audiences get way too small, they're just not going to get delivery on Facebook, and it doesn't work that well. And so part of what is required from like the continuous update is that as the traffic grows and we go from like 30K visitors to 100K visitors, things need to change in terms of the granularity of our targeting experiences and increasing the budget or changing the budget. And so a lot of that work kind of happens in tandem with traffic growth and saying that like, okay, if we've grown our traffic by this much, what new opportunities have been unlocked now in terms of how granular we can get with our audience segments. And because of that new level of granularity, we might want to tell a piece of the story in this bucket that we haven't been able to tell before because we couldn't get this granular. So those are some of the ways that creative changes. But in general, you're right that once you do have a journey set up, people come into it and leave it and there's generally like a fresh wave of new people that are coming in, that for the most part, a lot of the structure still applies. And it's just kind of thinking about what little tweaks need to be made here and there to accommodate the growth in traffic. But then the other thing we think about too is with retargeting, a lot of people kind of set up those always on campaigns, the ones that are targeting people from a recency perspective for the next maybe 7 to 30 days after their visit. Generally, that's kind of the window that people think about. If I've seen some really bad retargeting setups where somebody's put like 180-day audience and then the campaign just like always on. Like, do you know that this means that your customer is going to see this for the next 180 days? Crap, no, I didn't think about it that way. And so that's not good. But there is more to retargeting, and a lot of what we try to do as well is, what do we do with the audience that is beyond the 30-day audience? So we create these cool journeys. Great. Somebody comes and then they'll go through these like flows and sequences, and that's awesome. But then at some point when they are now, moved out of that flow, where hopefully they enter to the point where they're not seeing any more ads, because you don't want to show them ads forever. What do we do then? And there we think about it as the context of like, very similar to email. You have these things called retargeting lists. These are like larger audiences, let's say the 180-day audiences, or even bigger on Google Display, where these are people that maybe you can go as granular, as wide as just like anybody who's visited my site over the last 180 days. Or you can go like anybody who's looked at bracelets in the last 180 days, or anybody who read this specific piece of blog content in the last 180 days. You can create a ton of these different retargeting lists and then run what we call like nudge campaigns or blitz campaigns that only run for like 2-3 days. They target the whole list, but they'll only be like short-lived. They run for 2-3 days. They kind of say a certain message that's very relevant to what's happening in the brand's life or their marketing calendar at that moment. And it doesn't just go on forever. And so we see a really cool mix of these kind of like always on, ongoing retargeting flows and sequences, and then a variety of these like smaller little blitz campaigns that are targeting the bigger lists. And so that's where a lot of creativity can come into play in terms of, what kind of cool, relevant, new creative do we want to show to these folks who haven't been to the site in like 180 days or something, to try to bring them back into that kind of retargeting flow.
Nice. You kind of touched on this, but I'm curious to get your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
By this approach, obviously you're working towards conversion and being efficient on the initial conversion. But do you think it increases the overall lifetime value of customers for brands by taking this more thoughtful approach?
Yeah. So, our intuition is screaming that is exactly what the needles that it can move. It's hard to prove that with data if you want to be rigorous with the data. And because a lot of times you can like look at some data and then you can make it say whatever you want. And so I think we've always tried to be very diligent with how we analyze the data and then come to certain conclusions. Our entire view is that like intuitively, the thing that'll cause a customer to want to buy from a brand over and over again, every touch point experience that they've had with that brand was perfect. The customer service was great. The shipping experience was great. The product itself was great. Everything felt like a phenomenal experience from end to end, from the moment that they discovered the brand to the moment that they received the product. Every touch point matters in terms of that overall story. So to say that if we increase shipping speeds, will that help? If we make the unboxing experience better, will that help? If our website has like really great content, will that help? And it's like, I think the answer is that like all of these pieces play a role in a scenario where it's like the sum is greater than its parts sort of situation, where if the experience was consistent across the entire customer journey, then it's all of those things together with a really phenomenal product that create this sort of experience that a customer wants to be buying from a brand over and over again. And so that's kind of what's guiding our intuition. And we're trying to do a lot of interesting stuff around trying to prove this with data as well, to see like, can we show a correlation between this and repeat purchase? We're already seeing a lot of interesting signs around just like generating more revenue with retargeting, just on the fact that like you keep showing people the same ad over and again, at some point they'll just like blind it out. But we're seeing some really positive signal that brands that have adopted this kind of customer journey retargeting approach have just generated more revenue from the retargeting efforts because more people are kind of converting and buying. Sometimes that comes at a lower CPA target. So you might have like a slight drop in return on ad spend multiples, but an increase in overall sales. And we work with like each brands to figure out like where that sort of balance fits with folks. But we definitely do see a lift on more revenue being generated with retargeting. And a lot of what we're trying to think about is like, how do we also play an important role in that kind of post-purchase retargeting? And we're very early at this point, but how do we also look at conversion events to be able to understand who is a first-time customer and who is a repeat customer? So a lot of times people look at their retargeting and be like, oh, I spent this much, I made this much. But how much of that could have been from a repeat customer? And just kind of separating those things out to be able to say, here's our retargeting spend for net new customers, here's our retargeting spend for repeat customers, to be able to look at that and more definitively say, this approach to retargeting does have meaningful impact on generating kind of repeat purchase and increasing LTV. But yeah, in general, a lot of the kind of marketers that I respect, that I've talked a lot to about, when they think about the concept of increasing repeat purchase and lifetime value, it feels to me that there is this like really big overarching strategy around what are all the 10, 12, 11, 15 things that we're going to do that if we get these things right, we think that, these are all going to contribute towards repeat purchase. And a bunch of them are things I mentioned, like shipping experience, unboxing experience, customer service. And it's more like, I think we're moving to a situation where like some things are just going to have to be like table stakes. Who even argues today that if we don't have like a beautiful website that loads fast, like it's not even a question. I think it's that evolved from like intuition, but then also being able to back that up with data and say like, okay, here is the proof. When a beautiful website that loads fast, like here's all the numbers that back that up. But like people would have been able to predict that earlier too, that like, yeah, of course it'll be a better overall experience if you have those things right. And so we're kind of starting there and trying to be as diligent as possible in terms of like reading the data to see what it says. But we're hoping that like that's a really big place that we hope we can create a lot of value for the community, because we run a lot of campaigns for a lot of customers and we see a lot of data around this stuff, and kind of didn't want to just like jump the gun quickly to be able to say, aha, here it is. Like everybody look at the numbers and try to be a little bit more diligent with it. But as we get a better understanding of that piece, we're hoping to publish a lot more content around helping on that education front of like, here's the actual like difference in the numbers when we do retargeting this way versus not.
Very cool. So real quick, everybody can go to shoelace.com to see pricing and learn more about what you guys do. Talk a little bit about who's a good fit for Shoelace and sort of what's it like getting started with you guys, and what could they expect?
Sure. Yeah. So in general, we have found the merchants that are the best fit for us are the ones that are kind of a little bit past the getting started phase, where just trying to think about like, what do I want to sell? How do I get my first initial traffic? So something like brands that are starting to generate 6 figures worth of revenue per year, a couple $100,000 in sales per year, have a steady stream of traffic. That tends to be the good kind of starting point. Just as a small heads up though, we think a lot about the merchants that are below that. And we have a few product initiatives in the works that we hope to release for the community of merchants that are still kind of in that startup phase. At the moment though, our focus is a little bit on higher end, but for those who are below that threshold, stay tuned. And we have stuff coming down the pipes that are lower priced and are just more of a fit for brands of that size. But to implement proper customer journey retargeting, you do kind of need a fair amount of traffic to be able to create those segments. If you only have 500 people come to your site in a month, it's hard to take that and create these like granular segment and see delivery on Facebook. And so we've really just wanted to like align ourselves with the customers that we can create the most value for, given what we do. So that from a size perspective, that tends to be a good kind of starting point for brands that are a good fit for Shoelace, all the way up to kind of generating tens of millions of dollars a year in sales. Those tend to be really great because when you have 500,000 or 1 million or 2 million visitors per month to your site, there's a lot that can be done in terms of granularity and sophistication of a journey that we can create a lot of value for brands of that size. And then the other piece, which I mentioned a little bit earlier in our conversation too, around like if the e-commerce merchants are still at that phase where they haven't decided whether they're going like create a brand that is generating loyalty and repeat purchase as a business model versus the e-commerce merchants that are still thinking about like sourcing products on Alibaba and places like that, and just like just trying to hammer the internet with funky gadgets that folks want to potentially buy. If that's your thing, like cool, all the power to you, but it's maybe not the right fit for this kind of journey approach if you don't have a story to tell, if you're not trying to build loyalty, if you're not trying to build brand equity and community and stuff like that. And so that tends to be another variable that we can relatively quickly say like who's the right fit for Shoelace or not. The experience is we're available on the Shopify App Store, so you can connect us to your Shopify store, and we start like pulling data from your store, firing some custom events on different pages of your site, and then use that to create a first sort of retargeting journey proposal that is overseen by an account strategist, like a real human account strategist at Shoelace, who will look at what the computer has spit out in terms of a recommended journey strategy, make some tweaks to it, make sure that it's like journey from scratch on their own, but more so reviewing the journey proposal that our experts and software has created. And then they make their own tweaks to it, sometimes a bit of a back and forth, and then launch that journey into the wild. And then, a big part of our company has been, if we are the ones thinking a lot about customer journey retargeting and trying to understand what that means and how to do it right, et cetera, a lot of those kind of experts sit right here at this company. And we've tried to make those resources available in the form of like account strategists to our customers so that they can tap into this kind of level of expertise, having worked with like, hundreds of thousands of different brands to create journey retargeting campaigns for different verticals. That's a really big part of what brings people to Shoelace as well. It's like being able to tap into that expertise. And so, that's kind of the experience you'd get. And I'd recommend your listeners, if they're interested in learning about customer journey retargeting, maybe we can put a link to the deck that you talked about, which I think helps people like just visualize what we mean when we're talking about this journey approach to retargeting. And if anyone was interested in kind of learning more about the platform, we have the ability for folks to kind of request demos and stuff like that and talk to someone before installing it on their store if that's what they want to do, to just understand more. And you can find all of those links available on shoelace.com.
Awesome. Cool. I'll definitely include a link to the deck in the show notes, as well as a link to your website, shoelace.com. Reza, thanks for coming on today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great.